So you only use this once what you're doing is not really important and you're looking for like the cheapest VM ever. Okay, so now let's move on. So we're talking about size of the VM, right? So they have different size of the VM or VMs, right? So we have a standard DS. So these are just different nomenclatures, right, for VM. So you see this one has 8 gig memory, and this is the amount, $70 per month, right? So it's actually showing $17 per month, but not really $70 per month, depending on how your usage, depending on the amounts of time that you have this VM running, right? So right now we can create a name for it. Let's call a name. We can say this name is Genai Mix User. Okay. So I'm going to create a password for it. I'm going to call this password. Okay. So that's the password. I'm going to confirm the password. Okay. Now, so we're talking about inbound pull-throughs. When we're talking about inbound pull-throughs, know that we're talking about connectivity. And once you hear the word connectivity, just know you're talking about networking, right? Every resource in Azure, you need a way to connect with them, either externally or internally, right? So once you see the inbound means you're connecting into the application, right? Into the VMs. So I can decide to say I need connectivity from external network, right? So it's only going to be within the subnet, right? But if you do this, you won't be able to go into the VM, right? So you need to create a rule in your network security group in order for you to open any of the ports so that you can access that VM. So normally when you're creating a VM, it's actually good that since it's a test VM, it's not a production VM, that you open one of the ports. And since we're using the Windows, we're deploying in Windows, it's good that we use the remote desktop protocol. So the port 3389 has to be open, which is this one. So when you're doing anything like you want to connect through HTTP, you want to connect through server, or want to do HTTPS, you have to open these ones, right? So maybe you're using a Linux and you need to SSH, you need to open ports 22, right? So because we want to just remotely log into the system, we need to open RODP port, which is port 3389. All right. So this is what we need for the basic parts. So if we go up here, you can see we are currently on the basic part. So let's move on. So we have move on to the DICs. So move on to the DICs. So the DICs part, right? We have the OX DICs. So the OS DICs, once you deploy a VM, it actually deploys with two type of DICs, right? It deploys with the OX DICs, which is the operating system DICs, which is more permanent, and that goes into your Azure storage account, and it also deploys with the data DICs, which is ephemeral. That whenever you delete the VM, that goes along with it. Okay, so right now, the DICs is actually of two types. We have the premium DICs, the premium. We have the premium. We have SSD and we have HDD. Right. So SSD is solid state drive. So these are best for production workload because they are actually good for high inputs and outputs operations, which is high ups, right? So we have the HDD. So HDD are good for backup, non-critical, and infrequent access. So anywhere you go to, you know that SSD, solid state drive, are more expensive than the HDD because why? They are faster, right? They have low latency. So, and the classification for the SDD is that we have the premium and then we have the standard. According to the word premium, you know that once you're using a premium, anything that's premium is more expensive than the standard. So this contributes to the cost of your VM, right? So if you're not doing anything that's really, really intensive, you're not doing anything that's really, really, really serious that would not need a premium disk, it's actually better that you go with the standard because it's going to reduce the price. But if you go with this, it's going to increase it a little bit more. Even this one is going to increase this more. So this one is higher than this in terms of performance and in terms of price, followed by this. Let's put this one as well. Okay, so we can just leave this if we want. So we have the option to delete. If we delete the VM, right, because the VM is deploying into a resource group. So once you delete the VM, you have the opportunity to say no. I want to be able to access this data that I already have in this VM. I don't want it to go along with the VM, so that once I deploy another VM, I can attach that the operating system disk to it and continue doing what I'm doing. Okay, so if you don't want it to delete when you delete your VM, you can uncheck this, right? So there's key management. So key management, we have the platform key management and we have the customer key management. Is basically the way to access your VMs, your VM disks, right? If I don't have that key, the customer managed key, I will not be able to access it. But because I'm using the Azure platform key, anybody that has access to this platform key on Azure will be able to access your VMs and all of that easily. So we have enable ultra disk compatibility. This has to do with availability zone. Of course, you hear the word ultra disk. It means that you are improving the performance of the disk itself. Okay. Moving down, so we'll talk about the other data disk. So I can create and attach a data disk along with this one as well. Okay, so we have advanced options, but these are not actually needed to create the basic VMs. So we go back to networking. So by default, you can already see that it has already suggested a VM for us. If you look at this name very well, it's a VNet, which is a virtual network. So all resources in Azure needs to be inside a VNet in order for them to communicate. Even to communicate internally within the subnet, it has to be inside a VNet, right? And for you to communicate, whether from on-premises, whether from the internet and anywhere, it needs to be inside a VM. Otherwise, nothing can communicate with it. Okay, so that's why this has already created a VM that will be attached to the network interface. Okay, so it also created a subnet for us, which is 10.0.0.0/24. Right, so this has like 256 IP space attached to it, and it gives us a public IP. So the public IP, we can connect to it from the internet, right? So we have the NIC network security group. So we're using the basic network security group, right? So later on, we'll see what network security group is. Network security group is just basically creating different rules for how your resource can be accessed to the internet, to the network, right? So is a very good way to protect your network. You can say that you can block a particular IP range, you can block a particular port from accessing your VMs and all of those things. You can set outbound rules, you can set inbound rules and all those things. Okay. So those are basic stuff, and everything looks good here. So management. So everything looks good here to create a basic VM. So there's also this beautiful part which is called auto shutdown. So Microsoft Azure added this auto shutdown because if you don't shut down your VM for the amount of time that is on, right, the disk will be consuming charges. The other stuff are like your public IP address also will be consuming a little bit of credits and all those things. So you need to set an auto shutdown. If you remove this, it means that your VM will keep running. So some organizations actually need their VM to keep running, right? So they remove this sometimes. They don't need it to auto shutdown. But if you're using a development environment, you don't need your development environment to keep running so that it can be consuming a lot of money. In fact, some developers just develop whatever they want to develop and delete the VM, or they can just leave it, the allocated mode. When they need it, they come back to it again. Okay. So let's go back to monitoring. Okay, so monitoring is basically saying collect diagnostic information from um, this VM, so that we'll be able to look into whatever is happening in the VM, right? And that actually goes into um, the storage accounts, so that you can be there's a managed storage account, or you can have a uh, an unmanaged storage account. So the boot diagnostics, sometimes once you're trying to load a system or a VM, it runs into an issue. If you access the diagnostics, you'll be able to know what that issue is. Maybe there's a problem with the agents, maybe there's a problem with um, the boot files and all those things. Maybe there's a corrupt image. So especially for support, our support can be able to troubleshoot that problem and resolve the issue. Okay, so there's not really much there. So we can move over to advanced. So advanced is actually something more advanced. Actually, it's like saying, once I deploy this VM, I need something like extensions um, to be deployed along with it. What that means, for instance, once I'm deploying this VM, I can decide to say I want a WordPress, I want a WordPress, I want a higher server to be deployed alongside with it. So you can do all those custom extension, configuration, deployments. So once you deploy the VM, if you enter into the VM, you see that those things are already deployed inside. Okay. So then tagging. Tagging is basically a way of managing your any resource in Azure. You can put the tag so that once you're searching for, maybe you don't really remember the name, you can tag this. Since this is the development environment, you can set a tag for it, so that once you search for the development environment here, everything that has that tag, not only virtual machine, everything, maybe you create a network and you call that, you tag it. It's just like tagging. Everybody should know what tagging is. Like, you have different set of books. You have white book, blue book. So you have a box for them. You put all white book into one particular box. You call that box let's say you call that box chemistry. All books that has to go into that place is chemistry. So you have tagged all the books inside that box as chemistry. So that's the tag for that box. So you have another black box. You put all the books inside, you call that mathematics. So everything inside that black box is mathematics. So instead of looking for those individual books, you can just put mathematics, search for mathematics, and everything about mathematics will come out. So that's just the basic idea of tagging. Okay, so now we can go ahead and then do the review and create. So what this does is that it checks everything that you've imputed. If there's any problem, it's going to tell you that you cannot deploy this until you go and correct this problem, and then come back again. So there's something I did not mention. The location where you are deploying your VM to also have an impact on the pricing as well. If I'm deploying a VM in, let's say, Africa, South Africa, for instance, the price will be different from when I'm deploying a VM in East US, right? It may be lesser, maybe more, but it will be different. So the pricing actually determines the region actually determines the pricing as well. Another thing again that determines where you deploy your VM are compliance. For instance, in China, for example, you're not allowed to host your data outside of China, right? So for that reason, you want to deploy your VM in China Gov, an Azure China Gov. So everything you're deploying has to be within that region in China. Okay. Your organization, your company might say, I don't want any VM to be deployed in Africa. I want them to be deployed only where we are, let's say in the US, right? So I don't want anything to be deployed in Europe, right? I don't want anybody from Europe to have access to any of my VMs. I want them to be deployed there. So those are the things that will determine where you deploy your VM. So compliance, um, your pricing as well. Okay, so it has passed the validation. So what this means is that you can go ahead and create. But before you go ahead and create, this is what you're going to be paying. Right? You're going to be paying approximately 0.1 cents per hour. Like that is extremely cheap, right? If you want to go and rent a laptop of this quality, it's going to be way more expensive than this per hour. So you can go ahead and create the VM. So it's going to take some time to create the VM. While it's creating, we can ask questions if we have any. So you can see it's initializing deployments.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Richard. It has been a very interesting moment. I noticed something
Okay.
when you started the practical.
Yeah.
From I think my archaic knowledge. Yes,
Okay.
before you can create. No, I don't have any knowledge, but I have like old knowledge. Before you can create any anything,
Mhm.
you need to create a resource group. Inside the resource group, you can be creating every of your thing concerning that particular deployment you want to do. Let's say you are just the way you are creating a VM now. You create a resource group first. Inside the resource group, you create your VM, do your configuration inside the resource group. I noticed we didn't create a resource group.
Okay, we actually did create a resource group, and that resource group we call it Dynamics VM, which is this, and you can see resource group
Yes, I know we
is
created the
Dynamics VM.
resource group.
Yep.
We created the resource group alongside when we were creating the VM.
Yep. Yes. So so it depends on what you actually want, right? Because we are having this tutorial, and I want to show you the basic way. When I was creating the VM, if you pardon me, I can do something. Let me open this and open another Azure portal. So, but I just want to make mention of something here. So it has already deployed, right? So you say your deployment is already complete. But just to answer your question, I just want to go back here. It's going to load. It's going to load. I just want to show you something, right? So if we go back to this VM again, want to create a new VM, just like just go back a little bit more. So we create an Azure VM. Right. Now you will see something. So this is the subscription. Now it's asking me, do you want to create a new resource group or you want to use the previous resource group you have? So if I want to use the previous resource group I have, I can click on this drop down here. So I'm going to see various resource groups that I have. If I say, oh, I don't like anyone that I have here, I can decide to create one here, right? So this is using the template method. So the template, instead of you to go back, instead of you to say, oh, let me go back and create a resource group and then come back to create a VM. So the question is, why can't I do it once here? So the whole idea is for us to be able to be more efficient, right? To be more efficient. So in order for me to answer that, to do that, we can actually come here to create a resource group. We can say create this. Please, what's the name? I wasn't looking at your screen when you asked the question.
No, don't worry. Not really for me. I was actually talking for others that are learners.
Okay.
You know, someone that has no knowledge, basic knowledge about it at all may be among us. So the process of you
Okay.
creating, where you create that resources, you may not really know why you created that Dynamics VM in that resource group. You may not know the function of that. That was actually why I actually asked that question.
Okay.
So I don't think that there is need for us to start creating the resource group before we create the VM.
Yeah. So no, it depends actually. You have a very brilliant point. The reason being that your boss might decide to say, please, this VM that you're creating, put it inside the development environment VM resource group. So we can say this is called the development. RG is the short form of resource group, right? Instead of writing it full, so put it inside the development, and I want all this stuff, everything to be inside, to be in West US, right? So I can create this one. Now this is you're going to see what happened now. I can create this resource group. Once I create this resource group, it's going to be my development VM, right? So you can see that it's already here. Now we have different resource groups here because this is for, you have different resource group here. So anytime you want to create anything, once you click on that drop down, all of these are going to be available for you, right? So if I go here again and I say I want to create any resource, anything at all, because we're dealing with a VM right now, if I click on this, I remember our boss said that please put every VM that you're creating inside the development resource group. So the resource group is more like a suitcase. So everything has to go inside that place for organization's sake, so that everything is well organized, everything is neat, not scattered around anywhere anyhow. So that's why you can see that it's more available here. Any resource you create, any resource group you create is going to be in this drop down. However, if you don't want to use any of those ones, you can now create a new one. So that was what we did. Okay, I hope that's clear to everyone. So I am going to close this because we don't need this. Thank you too. I'm going to close this. We don't need this. I just opened that. So congratulations. Our deployment is now complete. Okay, so we can go to the resource. Okay, let's go to the resource.